All right, everybody, and today's lesson is all about ponds. So there's a lot of lessons you can learn from fishing a pond, whether you're a tournament angler and fish ponds for fun or just fish ponds because you don't have access to another body of water. I can tell you myself, I still fish ponds because they're a lot of fun. Ponds can still be very challenging to find fish in. So I wouldn't think that, sometimes people make comments about, oh, we're just fishing a pond. Well, that's crazy because some of the ponds I've fished are harder bodies of water than in a lake. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go down through what a pond breakdown is. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw out an actual picture of the elements of a pond that a lot of times they have. So let's take our basic pond and so basically there's a couple components of a pond, okay? Basically, generally there is a stream that feeds into a pond, okay? Down on one end, there will be a dam, okay? There'll be a emergency spillway, okay? And then there will be an overflow where the water kind of goes into or goes over to exit the pond. Real important things about a pond is the spring side or the water side, okay, is going to be your shallow, and your dam side, okay, is going to be your deep. Very important to remember that because, for seasonal things, there's, you may find fish only in the shallow or only in the deep, and for certain seasons, the fish are going to be exclusively in certain areas. So when we break down a pond, okay, and they actually look at the construction of it, remember now, this dam, okay, in this area here, okay, that's around here, is often fortified with rock, okay, or different types of materials that are put in there to shore up the dam when they actually make it. So there's a lot of natural structure that exists, hard structure, down in the lower section of a pond, okay. And if you keep this in mind, when you're fishing, okay, if you have a bunch of creeks entering, a lot of times you get a lot of silt, okay, and this will be a softer bottom, and then toward the other end of the lake, you're going to have your hard bottom. So two things to keep in mind when you're fishing a pond that was a man-made created pond is that generally the deeper section or the dam section will have the harder bottom, and the softer side will be up on the top. Another thing, when you start going into ponds and you look at clear versus muddy water, no matter what ponds you're fishing, one of the biggest tips I can give you is don't, rush down to the pond, okay? The fish that are in the pond are very aware at the surroundings, okay? And if you rush down to the pond, make a bunch of noise going to the pond, you're going to spook all those fish away. And the reason for this is because the majority of fish that live in a pond are bank-oriented. They're not generally out here in the middle just kind of swimming around. They're generally around the bank. So when I approach a pond, I approach and instantly make casts parallel with the bank, okay? And a lot of times that's where you're going to find your most active fish. Muddy water is going to put them even more towards structure and the bank, okay? Clear the water, you can generally see the fish, but as always, approach the pond very cautiously because these fish are going to spook and go everywhere. As far as forage, okay, mainly, okay, it's young of year bait, okay? Now that can include mostly bluegills, sunfish, frogs, and crayfish. Generally, and even, okay, smaller bass, okay? Sometimes ponds, they talk about how, removing some of the fish from a pond can actually create a better environment because it's overpopulated. So a lot of times the bass cannibalize themselves and they actually eat the smaller bass. But all of your baits that you really want to focus on imitating are, not so many shad baits. A lot of ponds don't have your gizzard, threadfin, and blueback herring. They have the perch-like species. So you want to really keep in mind that these are the types of things that you want to imitate. My number one technique, okay, and let's just go through the seasons, right? So springtime, and that's anywhere between 40-degree water and 65-degree water, okay? My number one baits are a lipless crankbait, a jerkbait, like a suspending jerkbait, a Senko. As always, this will probably be on the list every single time, but, and maybe a square bill, okay, cranked really slowly. But with these baits, you can pretty much go to any pond, okay, and catch fish. Lipless crankbaits, the red eye shad works very well in. The Mega Bass Vision 110 jerkbait is dynamite. Generally, when I fish a pond in the spring, I'm fishing things on a spinning rod and fishing lighter baits and lighter lines. So, in the spring, those are typically the presentations that are going to work really well for me. Now, in the summertime, okay, a lot of times what you get is a lot of vegetation, right? You get the slop, you get the lily pads, you get all the grass that grows up. So, number one, I love frogs and toads. Okay, I also like a Senko, and just a Texas rig Senko weightless is really one of the prime baits that can work. Buzz baits, okay, thrown out if you have open water pockets, particularly if you have just a little bit of wind, okay, it really makes the buzz bait much better, okay. Plastic worms are going to be a standby all the time, just a regular Texas rig plastic worm. And the thing about a pond is typically, you know, if you're not catching them, you're not around them, or you've spooked them. So keep moving until you find them. And then in the fall of the year, okay, I really like spinnerbaits, chatterbaits, okay, jerkbaits, and you know, Senkos, because those always generally work. But particularly I start throwing a spinnerbait and chatterbait. As the fronts start to come through, you start to get a lot of wind. And that wind, okay, when it creates that ripple effect, you can catch a lot of fish on spinnerbaits. Now, one thing that I want to get into that is a very guarded secret of mine is wintertime pond fishing. So here in the north, our ponds actually freeze. And a lot of times I will fish a pond all the way till I can't get a bait into the pond. Now to do this, for wintertime, okay, bass, all of the fish in the lake will be positioned generally in a very, very small area. They're basically sitting on top of each other. So, and it's always going to be down at this deeper end by the dam in the spillway. Don't worry about fishing any of this other stuff, because they're going to be all located here. And I would say between 35 and 50-degree water, okay? The number one bait that I have is a blade bait, okay? And that's actually what I broke the Maryland State record on. It wasn't caught out of a pond, but a blade bait is nothing more than a silver buddy or an XPS blade bait. Simply cast it out, lift the rod tip just a hair, let it fall, lift it, and it's like a jigging spoon, okay? The other bait that can work, okay, is a jerk bait, fished on a spinning rod with extremely long pauses, and a drop shot. Those would be the only three baits that I would fish in the wintertime for pond bass, no matter what clarity the water is. Obviously, the clearer the water, the better the jerk bait will work, but the blade bait and the drop shot will work in any color water that's out there. So when you're dealing with cold water bass, the thing to remember is, you know, you want to make multiple casts to a certain area from different angles, okay? So change, you know, you may still be casting the exact same spot, but move, okay? And then cast at a different angle. Something about that triggers a lot more fish. Pond fishing is unbelievable, okay? I love it, particularly when the water's cooler. I tend to catch my largest fish when the water is colder and there's less people in the water. So, this is all about ponds, and I hope you've enjoyed the video about ponds, so I'll see you in the next one.